Mic check 1 2. Subcommittee will come to order. At the conclusion of opening statements yesterday, the chair called up H.R. 1301, and the bill was open for amendment at any point. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? H.R. 1301. Are there any amendments to H.R. 1301?
Mr. Chairman.
If not, I now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, for nearly 3 decades, a large segment of amateur radio operators have been prohibited from installing any form of functional antennas on their own homes due to land use restrictions. For those of you that do not know, amateur radio operators perform a number of vital functions to help establish communications for our first responders during disaster. When the rest of the communications infrastructure goes down due to a disaster, it is hams that are able to patch through communications for our first responders so that they're able to effectively communicate, which is a vital and life-saving function. As the FEMA director recently said, quote, "I think there's a tendency to believe we've done so much to build infrastructure and resiliency in all of our other systems that when everything else fails, amateur radio is oftentimes our last line of defense. When you need amateur radio, you really need them." It's important to note that when many of these regulations were first put into place, land use restrictions throughout the country were much less pervasive, but over time, these areas have become more and more prevalent, which is not necessarily a bad thing by any means, but just as we've done in our committee time and again, it's good to look back at laws and regulations that were put into place long ago to make sure that they're kept up to date with the ever-evolving pace of innovation and change. Over the past 30 years, while these other land use restrictions have been in place, the flip side of this issue and the basis for this legislation is that FCC policy requiring municipalities to reasonably accommodate the placement of antennas for amateur radio use has worked wonderfully. Antenna height, configuration, and aesthetics have been subject to municipal jurisdiction under the FCC's reasonable accommodation policy. The relationships that have been built on the basis of cooperation following these standards between the licensees, land use planners, and reasonable regulations has resulted in a process that retains the decision-making power to the municipalities while allowing amateur radio operators to have the equipment necessary to effectively complete their functions. This is exactly the model on which we put together this legislation through a reasonable accommodation standard. There's nothing in this legislation that would prohibit the review or approval of amateur radio antennas before their placement or to prohibit them in certain common areas. However, I do understand the concerns that have been brought forward by parties impacted by this legislation. I'd also like to thank those parties for their willingness to come forward to reach a consensus on this issue before we reach the full committee markup on the bill. I understand some scheduling issues prevented us from having new language for today's markup, but it's my sincere hope that we'll be able to work together to find a solution that works for everybody in this issue. And this is something, Mr. Chairman, that I think is very indicative of this committee, is our ability on both sides to come together and work through issues, sometimes as niche as this, but very important, and other times even bigger issues. So I appreciate the both sides of the aisle willing to work together on this. And I just want to make one more point. You know, as a military pilot, with some of the new technology, I remember flying, back in 06, 07 overseas, and using amateur radio operators to pass messages. In some cases, it was encoded messages that nobody understood what they meant, but they were passed to our command post, which had a mission status, or sometimes you can even, in a very doomsday scenario, receive an encoded message from and through these operators. And lastly, they also do phone patches. If you want to call your mom back in Bloomington, Illinois, you can have these operators do a phone patch and do it through the radio. So personally, I have appreciated what they do from a very small perspective of just flying overseas with the military. And again, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank everybody involved in helping to get this done, and I look forward to this bill passing. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his good work on this legislation and his time. Are there other members? Yes, I now recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Escher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Mr. Kinzinger for his legislation. This is a bipartisan bill. You've worked hard on it, and it shows because there are over 100 co-sponsors. So while we have some concerns about, the bill having impacts on homeowners associations. I appreciate Chairman Walden saying that that we'll work this out, as you said, and so we're prepared to move this along with a voice vote. So thank you for your work, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I would move strike the last word. I feel like I have to say something since I'm one of the only licensed amateur radio operators in the Congress. And I concur with what Mr. Kinzinger said. You know, it's not just in emergencies that amateur radio operators are active. I know my own hometown of Hood River, the radio amateurs of the Gorge are often active in helping communicate with communications during various community events, non-emergency events, the cross-channel swim. There are all kinds of bicycling competitions and all, mountain biking and all, where they will be the communications network to help facilitate safety in many cases for the runners or the swimmers and all that kind of communication. And then certainly when the lights go out and the power goes out and everything else goes down, many of these amateur radio operators then have their own generators. They have their own communication systems that are backed up by generators and perform that emergency communication. And in addition to just the voice communication, as you probably know, one of the best ways to get through when everything else fails is old Morse code, da 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 da. I mean, you go through it, and that can get through when nothing else can. And so I think this is really important. And with today's technology and the different bands that amateur radio operators can operate on, you don't necessarily have to have a giant tower blocking everybody's view in a community living situation. Literally, you can get a 2-meter antenna that's probably a foot high with a mag mount that you can put up on the roof or somewhere. And, you know, the Supreme Court has stepped in some of these cases for satellite communication. There was a period of time when they tried to blanket prohibit little satellite dishes in these home situations. And the court came in and said, you know, for television, you can't just have a blanket ban. We think the same should apply to amateur radio. That certainly there can be some reasonable prohibitions, but a blanket ban is probably shouldn't be legal, and B, really takes away an emergency communication tool that, frankly, in the case of a tornado or a hurricane or a flood or something, people in those homeowners associations may be glad they got a ham radio operator next door that can fire up their rig and communicate and get a signal out when everything else fails. So I congratulate the gentleman for his work on this legislation. I encourage the parties who are still negotiating out there, get your work done sooner rather than later, because we intend to move this bill in full committee and get it across the House floor soon. So we appreciate the good faith negotiations that have gone on. We look forward to those coming to a conclusion sooner rather than later, because I think there's common ground that can be achieved here, reached here, and I just think it's really important to get done. So with that, I'd yield back the balance of my time. And are there other members seeking recognition on the minority side? Are there other members on the Republican side seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 1301 to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. The chair now calls up H.R. 2661 and asks the clerk to report. So, I'm sorry, 2666.
H.R. 2666, to prohibit the Federal Communications Commission from regulating the rates charged for broadband internet access services.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to this legislation? Seeing none, are there other amendments? Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The amendment number, ma'am?
I think it's 1. Forbear 1.
Forbear 1. And do members of the committee have copies of this amendment? There it is. Okay.
Amendment to H.R. 2666, offered by Ms. Eshoo. Strike Section 2 and insert the following. Section 2, forbearance from applying rate regulations and certain other requirements to broadband.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I stated at last month's legislative hearing, I don't support the FCC setting the monthly recurring rate that consumers pay for broadband internet access service. And I stated that very clearly and very firmly. On the surface, that's what the No Rate Regulation of Broadband Internet Access Act appears to do. Where we have a problem is that in actuality, the bill is far broader and could eviscerate the FCC's authority to protect consumers against truth in billing practices and discriminatory data caps, to ensure that broadband availability through USF and E-rate actually are protected, to address rate-related issues and merger reviews, to ensure enforcement against paid prioritization and other essential consumer protections. I think that this is a reminder to all of us that, that the language in bills is very, very important. Once bills become law, those words walk into people's lives. So it's very important not only to read them, but to understand what the impact of the words are. Now, Mr. Chairman, in your October 27th statement before the subcommittee, you asked the question, and it's an important question: what will happen with a new chairman? What if someone pushes the FCC to walk back some of the forbearance they agreed to as part of their open internet order? This amendment offers an answer to that question by codifying the forbearance approach used in the FCC's open internet order. This ensures that the, just a second here. This ensures that the forbearance used in the FCC's order cannot be reversed by a future commission. The very concern that you and other colleagues have raised time and time again. During last month's legislative hearing, Mr. Chairman, you reiterated that the purpose of the legislation is to, quote, bind future chairmen to live by the commitments that this administration has made. This amendment appropriately targets your intended goal while ensuring that we don't undermine, either intentionally or unintentionally, the FCC's authority and its fundamental mandate to protect consumers. So for all of these reasons that I've stated, I strongly urge my colleagues to support the amendment. It's one page, which is sometimes unusual, but it is straightforward. It codifies the forbearance approach used in the open internet order, and I think that it speaks to the goal that you have spoken to and which I have quoted. Does anyone, do I have any time left? Let's see, 43 seconds. Anyone want to say anything? Mr. Doyle?
I would just add, just very briefly, is that, you know, we hear a lot from people that we're trying to regulate the internet like a utility. The FCC chairman, Wheeler, made it clear that that was not his intent, and I think putting this codifying this into the bill should calm the fears of those who feel that that approach won't be taken by some future commission. So I support the amendment.
Yield
Would the
back.
gentleman yield? I just point out that it is I'll take my own then, I'll move strike, last word. Actually, under Title II, it becomes a utility in effect. It becomes a common carrier. That's what it is. That was the change under that, and the purpose of the underlying bill is to prevent the FCC from regulating rates for broadband internet access service, and I thought we had agreement on that. This amendment asks us to accept the notion that the only way to regulate the rates for broadband is through tariffing, and that's not the case. It's simply not true. These were issues, by the way, we were trying to work out in the negotiations until they were abruptly ended. The amendment would codify the FCC's forbearance in the open internet order. That's true. In that order, the FCC agreed that it would not use its tariffing authorities to regulate rates. However, it did not agree to not regulate rates through its enforcement of Sections 201 and Section 202. So Sections 201 and 202 require that rates and charges for telecommunications services to be just and reasonable. So this gets back to your argument about utilities and common carrier. That leaves the FCC with considerable discretion to decide what just and reasonable is. Now, that means the FCC retains the authority, and as a result of reclassification, can now use it to regulate the rates for broadband. That's what happens when you go down this path. The amendment asks the subcommittee to accept that same flawed premise the FCC does, that the FCC cannot regulate rates through enforcement. See, what we don't want to do is create a situation where, okay, they can't tariff, but they can come back after the fact and tell you you got it wrong. That creates the uncertainty in the marketplace that I don't think any of us would want. Is go ahead, be innovative, go out there, but then we're going to second guess you after the fact. And that's what we're concerned about on the Republican side, is that could happen. Through a series of enforcement actions declaring rates unjust or unreasonable, the Commission can achieve the same outcome as an action to declare what constitutes a reasonable rate. Defining what something is and defining what it isn't can achieve the same thing. So we oppose the FCC's use of either authority to regulate broadband rates, and as such, I reject this amendment. After the fact regulation could be even more onerous than tariffing before the fact. Now, I also want to talk a bit about the issue of consumers, because we all care deeply about making sure that the consumers are treated fairly. There's nothing in this bill that would restrict the FCC's ability to enforce its truth in billing rules, rules that regulate the way providers present charges on bills. And I would defer to counsel on that point to make sure I'm accurate. Is there anything in this bill that would regulate, that would prevent the FCC from enforcing its truth in billing?
No.
So, as the ranking member is well aware, the majority has been actively working with the minority to craft language that would prevent the FCC from abusing its authority while retaining the ability of the FCC to protect consumers from fraud and other bad acts. The amendment presents us, I think, with a false choice between an unfettered FCC or unfettered billing practices, and I think there are better ways to do this. I would now recognize the gentleman from Illinois I'll yield to him the remainder of my time, and then he can seek his own after we go to the minority side.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I appreciate the discussion on this, and I appreciate that everybody wants to get to the point, seemingly, where we codify to an extent the FCC's inability to do this. I guess I'm confused a little bit because, when we had the hearing, it seemed like there was an opportunity to work together. I had heard that the staffs of both sides were talking, and we were kind of coming close to a conclusion. And even as early as yesterday, I had heard that, I'm talking about, hey, what's the markup going to be like? Is it going to be long? Is it going to be quick? What's going on? And it's like, well, yeah, we're probably pretty close to having a bipartisan agreement. And then, it's like, bam, not anymore. So, I guess I don't know. It seems like we have the same goals here, but for some reason we're fighting when I think we had a real opportunity to work together. So I hope, look, I'm going to vote against this amendment. It probably will fail. I hope this doesn't discourage us from doing what this committee does best, which has worked together. For some reason, you know, obviously this fell apart at the last minute, and I guess I don't quite understand why, but we'll see. And with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I'll yield
Right,
back.
reclaiming the final 14 seconds, I couldn't agree more. Was deeply disappointed that the negotiations abruptly ended and we were presented with amendments when we thought we were pretty close on these issues. So it's certainly not what we intended. Perhaps on the way to full, we can address the issues on this and the issues on the exemption for small providers, because I know there are members of this committee who care deeply about the cost and burden on small ISPs of the FCC's disclosure regulations. And I intend to work with those members on both sides of the aisle who want to work in that cooperative spirit as we go on to full. I return the balance of my time. Are there other members seeking recognition on Ms. Eshu's amendment? Gentleman from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, question to council. So as we're having this conversation about what seems to be emphasizing on the first page of the legislation, line 4, where it says no rate regulation of broadband and internet access as in the title, I don't see a definition for that anywhere in here. Can you point me to the definition of rate regulation?
There is no definition of rate regulation in the bill.
Is there a definition of rate regulation anywhere?
In the FCC's rules, no, there's not.
Is there a definition of rate regulation in Webster's dictionary?
I don't have a Webster's dictionary in front of me, but so I can't answer that question for you, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's the question that we have here is when you're defining no against something, and we don't know what that something is, that something could be anything. It's starting to sound like a Dr. Seuss book. And that's what I hope that we can get to the bottom of is what indeed are we talking about? How do we isolate this? Because I think what we clearly see today is that on both sides of the aisle, we would agree with the decision from the FCC on no forbearance associated with rates. I think that's what the essence of Ranking Member Eshu's amendment is. And so there's more common ground here than there is not, but I think it's incumbently important that we identify and that we define this so that there are assurances that when we talk about consumer protections, that we talk about ensuring that when we talk that there's a responsibility to have truth in billing, so we all know what we're paying on these bills, that they're disaggregated, device rental fees, fraudulent, inaccurate, and contested charges. And then there's still a whole other question associated with paid prioritization rule. Does that get included in what would be defined under some as rate regulation, which is a whole other conversation I know that this committee is engaging in. And so, Mr. Chairman, I hope that as we get through this that we're able to maybe find some commonality.
Yeah, would the gentleman yield, because those
Absolutely.
are really valid points, and that's actually something that our staffs were negotiating on until those negotiations abruptly ended, was the definition of rate regulation. So we hope going forward we can get that figured out. Second, as you know, having been a public utility commissioner yourself, like others around me, there is a lot of case law that defines what rate regulation is and what it's not. So I think we could get this. We thought we were on a path to get this done, and frankly, we're surprised when we got the amendment.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, as a few of our colleagues who are in the room that are former utility commissioners also know, is that every jurisdiction in the country that operates under rate regulation has a different definition. And so that's why it's important that we clear this up. I thank you for that, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Appreciate the gentleman's constructive comments. Are there other members seeking recognition on the gentlelady's amendment? Are there any on the Democratic side seeking comment on the gentlelady's amendment? Oh, I now recognize, seeing none, I recognize the gentleman from North Dakota.
Well, I thank you, Chairman, and I thank the other side for the amendment and for this discussion. I too was, as you know, a regulator before coming to Congress, and the gentleman's exactly right. Each state jurisdiction might have a different definition, but case law does in fact create definitions because it does create obviously precedent. And I think that's why I think we should reject this amendment as a matter of fact, and that we got to get back to the table of finding the appropriate definition. If I've learned one thing in the short time I've been in Congress, the 3 years I've been here, it's that we don't generally err by restricting the regulatory agencies. If we err in any way, it's by giving them too much authority to set these things. People elect us to make these decisions to protect them, not the FCC and, frankly, many other regulatory agencies. So I'd feel much more comfortable if we could get back to bipartisan discussions with the experts in this committee about what rate regulation is as we go forward, rather than passing this amendment, which I think just doesn't clarify it nearly enough for my taste. And frankly, codifying forbearance based on the regulatory agencies' forbearance is not what we ought to be doing. We ought to be setting the forbearance, we ought to be setting the restrictions, and then they carry them out. Frankly, I think it would be a service to the regulator as well as to the regulated, and more importantly, and most importantly, to the consumer. So with that, I yield back.
Well, will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said, and I guess my question, I'm just still having a hard time with why we're having to just kind of parse everything apart and minutia. I mean, let's just say they can't, regulate rates, period. I mean, that's what the FCC chairman Wheeler said. I believe he really believes he doesn't want to do it. And we're just saying, as Congress that makes laws that determines things, we're just saying, okay, cool, we agree with you. We're going to just put it in law and make sure it gets done. And I guess, I don't know. Like I said, we were really close yesterday, and for some reason we're not now. And hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we get there between now and full committee, but hopefully this is just a little hiccup, but I'll yield back to the gentleman.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
I appreciate the conversation. I think we can find common ground. In fact, Mr. Luan's comments are really helpful, and we'd be happy to work with you and your staff, given your vast experience on the Public Utility Commission, to work on these issues as we go forward to full, to make sure we get them right. I mean, we learned a lot out of the hearings on the bills. That's why we do them. We were prepared to make changes and to get this correct, because we all want to get it correct. And so, in the spirit of that, Mr. Lujan, we'd be happy to work with you. And Mr. Kramer, given your background as well, it'd be great to have you in that discussion and your staff more than, additionally. And so I think that would be good because we do want to get this right. And the question I forgot to drill down a little bit on was the truth in billing issue, and I would defer to counsel a bit about this, because this is important too. I want to make sure that we have truth in billing going forward. Can you tell us what is it that, in terms of the FCC's ability to enforce its truth in billing, do we do any violence to that with the underlying bill?
Mr. Chairman, the FCC's truth in billing rules, which are section 64-2401 of their rules, delineate 8 specific things that they are meant to protect, and this is taken from the FCC's website, all of which are about the presentation of charges, not the rates themselves. 1, provide a clear, brief, non-misleading, plain language description of the service or services rendered to accompany each charge. 2, identify the service provider associated with each charge. 3, clearly and conspicuously identify any change in service provider. 4, contain full and non-misleading descriptions of charges. 5, identify those charges for which failure to pay will not result in disconnection of the customer's basic local service. 6, provide a toll-free number for customers to call in order to lodge a complaint or obtain information. 7, place charges from third parties that are not telephone companies in a distinct section of the bill, separate from telephone company charges. And 8, provide a separate subtotal for third-party charges in a separate bill section on a separate page. None of which deal with the rate charged. Those are terms that address how those are presented to the customer on their bill.
I yield back to
I yield the balance of my time to Ms. Elmer.
Gentleman yields back. Are there other members?
Mr.
seeking-
Speaker,
Oh.
or Mr. Leader.
Well, actually, we need to go to this side, I believe. Have you already spoken on this? So? Yeah, Mr. Doyle, you can seek your own time and yield back.
Yeah,
think
I
would be
move to strike the last
appropriate.
word now.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from
Thank you,
Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield to my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. This is a worthy discussion, and the reason why I have raised the issue of the broadness of the bill and whether it's, I would like to think that it's unintentional in its broadness, what it can sweep up. Now, when you, the whole issue of just take this issue, limiting consumer protection actions such as truth in billing. Now, because a bill is a rate, then that word becomes operative at the FCC. They'd then be prohibited from doing anything with rates, the way the bill is drafted. So that's why we're raising paid prioritization. I listed them out in my statement relative to the amendment that I've offered. And a point of clarification to all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, my staff was never presented with an offer that included a definition of rate regulation. So we worked right up until yesterday, but there was not an offer that was placed on the table. So, you know, we want to work together. I told Mr. Kinzinger when we left the, when he first introduced the, offered his bill that I was very hopeful that we could work something out. Now, I'd like to ask the council, how do you define rate regulation?
I don't, ma'am.
You don't? Okay. Well, then I think therein lies the problem. Because while the FCC may not be actually regulating rates, they examine them. And so, again, the language is so broad that it sweeps up, as the chairman said, we all care intensely about these consumer protections that have been put into place. And that's what is at risk. So that's what I want to say, and I think I'll yield back to, I thank the gentleman for yielding to me, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, and before I yield to Mr. Lew, look, we want to work together to get this done. I think what Mr. Kinzinger said is pretty much the same thing as what Ms. Eshu's saying, is that there's an attempt to codify what the FCC's saying. The FCC chairman said he doesn't want to regulate rates. He intends not to do that. So you guys are saying, well, we want to make sure he doesn't do it or any future FCC chairman does it, so we want to put that in the statute. FCC chairman also said in the open internet order that he wants to forbear a huge part of Title II. And so we're saying, well, let's put that into, let's codify that also, so that no future FCC chairman can go back and try to regulate the internet under the sections of Title II that the chairman says we want forbearance on. So I think we're both talking about a mechanism to do, you know, what you have a concern about and what we have a concern about. Now there's some dispute over how broadly this rate regulation is written, and whether or not it'll have protections for paid prioritization and throttling and some other things. But I think these are things we can work out. And I think we're both saying the same thing, basically. You know, we're both expressing the desire to put in statute those things that the current FCC is saying they're going to do anyway, so that it binds a future commission. And I'll yield to Mr. Lujan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. And Mr. Chairman, I just think we need to be cautious when we're looking at even the FCC's approach with the rulemaking, with trying to make a delineation from charges and rates, because inherently there are charges within the rates, and you just have to look at interstate charges that are commingled within the rates, and you start to disaggregate those on the bill. When we talk about truth in billing, it's all the same. So again, that's why it's so important when we look at this to delineate what, in fact, when we talk about the four bands of rates and the ability to look at charges and how those relate to the rates. And so let's just be careful as we look at that. And thank you, Mr. Doyle. Yield back my time.
Yield back. Members on this side, I recognize Gentlelady from North Carolina. But before would she yield to me for?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to point out that I think we have a real discrepancy here in terms of the staff communication, because our staff was in communication with yours Friday afternoon, yesterday afternoon, on this topic, So they were discussing this topic, not that there was no discussion. So
no, I didn't say there wasn't a discussion, Mr. Chairman. I said that there wasn't an offer from you. We tried, and We didn't get to where we wanted to.
Well, there's a difference between we didn't get to where you wanted to and no offer, because my understanding is there was language. We have the council here.
My understanding as of late yesterday, the ranking member had asked us to seek technical assistance from the Federal Communications Commission on trying to find a way to tailor the language. To date, majority staff has not received any technical assistance in writing from the FCC.
I know they were working on that for 3 days and not getting response, so. I yield back to the gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just briefly want to say that I think we, again, as we're having this conversation, I think that it's important to note that we are all in agreement that we certainly want to make this process better, but it does look like we've got these technical issues that need to be worked out. And to the gentlelady's amendment, I believe it nullifies everything that we're trying to achieve. So we kind of get back to the same place again. And I'm encouraged to know that we are all talking about the importance of consumers and transparency, especially when we have had that discussion before and we found ourselves in a place dealing with the FCC where transparency is sometimes important and sometimes it's not. So this is very good moving forward to me, and I hope that we can work this out. I can't support the gentlelady's amendment, but it's good to know that we are all thinking on the same terms when it comes to our consumers. So thank you. If anyone wants any of my time, they're welcome to it. I'll yield back then.
Gentlelady yields back. Are there members on the minority side that wish to weigh in on this topic any further? And are there members on the Republican side seeking recognition? Seeing none. If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Why don't we just go ahead and have the clerk call the roll, because I think we're going to end up there anyway. So the clerk will just call the vote roll.
Mr. Latta. Mr. Barton. Mr. Shimkus. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Lance. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Olson. Mr. Pompeo. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Long. Ms. Elmers. Mr. Collins. Mr. Kramer. Chairman Upton. Ms. Eshoo. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Welch. Mr. Yarmouth. Ms. Clark. Mr. Loebsack. Mr. Rush. Ms. DeGette. Mr. Butterfield. Ms. Matsui. Mr. McNerney. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Pallone. Chairman Walden.
Walden votes no. Clerk will report the result.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 17 ayes and 10 nays. I'm sorry.
I think
there were
it's the other way
17
around.
nays and 10 ayes.
17 nays, 10 ayes. The amendment is not, we don't want to give false hope over on this left side of the aisle. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments to the legislation?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The chair recognizes that, wait a minute, the clerk, which amendment is it, Ms. Smith?
It's COMB 3.
Okay. I ask the clerk to report.
Amendment to H.R. 2666, offered by Ms. Matsui.
Actually, Mr. Rush, the vote had closed and we've moved on to another amendment, but we appreciate it. You've reported the amendment, right?
Amendment to H.R. 2666 offered by Ms. Matsui at the end of the following, Section 3, Rules of Construction.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, like my Republican colleagues, I have no interest in seeing the FCC get into the business of regulating consumer broadband rates. But I am concerned, and I expressed it at the hearing, that as written, H.R. 2666 may be overly broad and goes far beyond what we all agree on and could undermine important consumer protections. Like millions of Americans and many of my own constituents in Sacramento who made their voices heard last year, I am a strong supporter of the free and open internet. And I'm especially concerned about the potential for paid privatization schemes to create fast and slow lanes on the internet. We need the FCC to be able to act so that the internet remains a vibrant platform for innovation and free speech. This bill would go further than just harming net neutrality. I believe it could also impact other FCC protections we all agree on, like universal service support for infrastructure deployment, and to connect low-income consumers and schools and libraries. It could also prevent the FCC from going after fraud, like cramming on consumers' monthly phone bills. My amendment is simple. It would preserve the FCC's authority to address these key consumer protections. Our Republican colleagues tell us their only goal with this legislation is to block the FCC from regulating broadband rates. If that is truly the case, they should have no problem supporting this amendment. I urge all my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield to anyone on my side who wishes to speak. If not, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. I would move to strike the last word, unfortunately in opposition to the amendment. I appreciate the gentlelady comments on this amendment. The amendment, while there are some provisions I think we could find agreement on in your amendment, Ms. Matsui, especially as it relates to universal service and a few things. We think some of the language on the consumer protections may be a little overly broad. There are a couple other places that we'd like to have those discussions with you on. But because some of these are issues that were raised at our legislative hearing. There were issues that I actually referenced in my opening statement that we are interested in addressing. We were actively, again, working with the ranking member staff and the FCC to try and work through these issues. And while we don't agree 100% on every provision, I want to make that clear, put forward in the amendment, I do believe that there is room for compromise here. I've always believed that. In fact, I thought we were headed down that path until we started getting paper. We're happy to continue working toward a solution that achieves our dual goals of preventing harmful rate regulation while still protecting consumers. And again, our concern on this side is you can say you can't regulate rates, but if you leave the door open for the commission to come back after the fact and say the rates you charged were inappropriate or whatever, then you effectively have the worst kind of rate regulation at that point, because then people have gone out, they've done their business, everything else, and then you have a bureaucracy a few blocks away second guessing what happened. And so that creates real uncertainty in the marketplace as we see it. So with that, I reluctantly oppose your amendment, but would again extend the olive branch to continue working forward with your staff or others who want to work constructively with us. So are there any members on the Republican side seeking time? I will yield back the balance of mine. Are there members on the Democratic side? Chair recognizes gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Ms. Matsui for offering this amendment, and I think that it's a reiteration of what our concerns are on this side. I understand full well that the majority has never supported net neutrality, and so whatever is around it is a huge rub. We agree. We agree on this side, and that's why I think you know, I mean, we can get to yes, and I think that we're in a position to do that if, in fact, we don't want the rate regulation. We've spoken about don't use the internet as and treat it as a public utility. That's been the charge. We're saying forbear, but don't allow harm to be done in the areas where consumers are protected. Now, there's a real problem because there's not a definition of rate regulation. And yet, these words walk into the very principles and specifics where consumers are protected. And Ms. Matsui's amendment is very clear about those areas. So I think that if there's a real sincerity here, then we can come together on it. But what she has in her amendment are very important things. So you're saying you don't want those harmed. So I think the majority has to come up with a way to guarantee that there are not going to be those harms. But this whole area that's gray, other than precedent and law that has established it, is on the books and is operational. Again, I want to thank her for offering this because it casts a very bright light on some of the most essential elements of consumer protection. They are not small things. And if those go awry by very broad language, then we're damaging all of our constituents. Not just Democratic constituents, all of our constituents. So I thank the gentlewoman for offering the amendment. It's a very important one.
Gentlelady returns balance for time. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word and yield to the chairman.
Thank the gentleman. I just want to clarify for the record, more than a year ago, I and others on this side put forward a net neutrality bill. So to say we've never supported it is a misnomer, is not accurate. Our bill, what we don't support was common carriage. We didn't think we ought to treat the internet as a utility under Title II, because it would cause all kinds of other problems, which we're now trying to address in some respect because the Federal Trade Commission lost all of its authority when the FCC reclassified the internet as a Title II common carrier. Our legislation prohibited blocking. Our legislation prohibited throttling. Our legislation prohibited paid prioritization. We have legislation to do that. We'd welcome your support of it. We had the disclosure from the 2010 order in there. What we didn't support was common carriage regulation, because we think the greatness of the internet has been the lack of federal regulatory involvement in the internet. Everybody praises the internet for all the good things it's done, and it has. The expansion of education and jobs and economy, the biggest expansion of knowledge in the world. Think about medical advances, everything. And it's all virtually been done with no FCC second-guessing what happens. And if we don't make the right decisions here, some FCC will come back at some time and say, well, we're not going to really forbear against everything Tom Wheeler wanted to forbear against. Maybe we'll make some changes. So I think we could find some agreement maybe on forbearance here. And they're going to come back and say, well, you know, we're not going to rate regulate. Well, we said we weren't. But we'll come back after the fact and we'll question whether you got it right or not. And then we'll penalize you, like only Washington bureaucracies can penalize people with vengeance. And who do you appeal to? The same people that penalized you. How fair is that? And so, unfortunately, we were very close, I felt, in the negotiations here to address the issues that Mrs. Matsui and others have raised. And then for some reason, we get papered with amendments. So going to full, we'll work on these with anyone that wants to work in good faith with us. We sent out 3 weeks ago concepts. The staffs have been negotiating. I don't know what the heck went wrong. I just tell you, there was a way to get this done. Unfortunately, the minority took a different path. I now recognize the gentleman from Illinois.
Yeah, just a couple seconds, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I just wanted to add on to that again. I don't know why this negotiation, so to speak, fell apart. I mean, I think a lot of what we're talking about is correct. I think we're close. And, and maybe this is inside baseball to talk about, but it's when you're trying to get a bipartisan agreement and you're doing that, kind of staff to staff, member to member level, and you're close there, and all of a sudden somebody comes out and says, you know what, I know we're close, but instead we're just going to drop a couple of amendments with a take it or leave it approach. I mean, I think that's bad faith, maybe. And I think we can get there. Look, I'm not saying this is done, this is over, but I think in the discussion we're having, Mr. Chairman, I think we are close. It's like we're kind of talking past each other, and we're there, and we were there, talking about the negotiations, but now all of a sudden we're debating amendments to this bill that we probably could have come to real bipartisan agreements on. But anyway, I guess I don't understand the process, so we'll just press forward and hope we can do this on the way to full committee.
Thank the gentleman for his comments.
Mr. Chairman?
It's Mr. Latta's time, so let me.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say that, the discussions we're having here on the two amendments and the discussions that were going on between the staff, I wholly recommend that, as we go forward, that the staffs have been talking, and up to sounds like late yesterday. And I hope that those discussions can continue as we go to full on the bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back balance of his time. Are there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, gentleman.
I move to strike the last word.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Yarmouth. I want to make something very clear here. I'd like to invite all members that haven't been to my office to drop by one day. There is a wall, and Cannon has very wide walls, and the ceilings are very high. And that's the wall of pride in my legislative life, because there are over 40 bills there that have been signed into law by 3 presidents, all bipartisan bills. And I've served on this committee since January of 1995, the beginning of my second term. So I think my work product is proof that I can and others can and have worked in a bipartisan way. We couldn't come to an agreement on this, and it's unfortunate. I think that it is a slight to suggest that we throw paper around when we offer amendments. An amendment is an idea. And while we may not agree on the idea that's being put forward, we debate them, and sometimes that leads to something else. One thing can lead to another. But I don't think that we should get into an area where we start diminishing each other for offering amendments. I offered an amendment. It codifies. There's nothing stronger than a statute. The President of the United States cannot create a statute. It's only the Congress. So what Congresswoman Matsui has offered, what I have offered, we've offered in good faith. The staff negotiated in good faith from your side and our side. So let's just turn the volume down and be respectful of these vehicles that are given to us not only as members of this committee, but as members of Congress. And I want to put that out there because this wasn't anything cute to Sunday, Mr. Chairman. And I say that with all sincerity and with all respect to all of my colleagues. And I thank Mr. Yarmouth for yielding, and I yield back.
I thank the ranking member, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back balance of his time. Are there other members seeking recognition on either side? If not, we are prepared to vote on the amendment. If there's no further discussion, we'll go ahead and call the roll. Those in favor of the Matsui amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, no, and the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Latta. Mr. Latta votes no. Mr. Barton. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes no. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes no. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes no. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes no. Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson votes no. Mr. Pompeo. Mr. Pompeo votes no. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes no. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Bilirakis votes no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson votes no. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes no. Mrs. Elmers. Mrs. Elmers votes no. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer votes no. Chairman Upton. Chairman Upton votes no. Ms. Eshoo. Ms. Eshoo votes aye. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle votes aye. Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch votes aye. Mr. Yarmouth. Mr. Yarmouth votes aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes aye. Mr. Loebsack. Mr. Loebsack votes aye. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes aye. Ms. DeGette. Ms. DeGette votes aye. Mr. Butterfield. Ms. Matsui. Ms. Matsui votes aye. Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney votes aye. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan votes aye. Mr. Pallone. Chairman Walden.
Walden votes no.
Chairman Walden votes no.
The clerk will correctly report the total.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 11 ayes and 16 nays.
11 ayes, 16 nays. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments to this legislation? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 2666 to the full committee. All those in, we'll go ahead and do a roll call on this as well. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Latta. Mr. Latta votes aye. Mr. Barton. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson votes aye. Mr. Pompeo. Mr. Pompeo votes aye. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes aye. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Bilirakis votes aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes aye. Mrs. Elmers. Mrs. Elmers votes aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins votes aye. Mr. Kramer. Chairman Upton. Chairman Upton votes aye. Ms. Eshoo. Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle votes no. Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch votes no. Mr. Yarmouth. Mr. Yarmouth votes no. Mr. Clark. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes no. Mr. Loebsack. Mr. Loebsack votes no. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes no. Ms. DeGette. Ms. DeGette votes no. Mr. Butterfield. Ms. Matsui. Ms. Matsui votes no. Mr. McNerney. Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan votes no. Mr. Pallone. Chairman Walden.
Walden, aye. Are there other members who are not recorded on this vote? Clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 15 ayes and 11 nays.
The bill is favorably reported. We will now turn to the discussion draft on the Small Business Broadband Deployment Act. The chair calls up that discussion draft and asks the clerk to report.
Discussion draft. To ensure that small business providers of broadband internet access service can devote resources to broadband deployment.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the Small Business Broadband Deployment Act? Seeing none, are there amendments? Chair recognizes, for what purposes the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Is this
Which
February
amendment
2nd?
is it?
For clarification, it's Sunset 01, February 2nd.
Amendment to discussion draft offered by Mr. Loebsack. Page 2, after line 11, insert the following and redesignate succeeding provisions accordingly.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to offer this amendment to the Small Business Broadband Development Act discussion draft. I agree with the FCC's transparency rule that consumers deserve to know what they are buying when they pay their monthly broadband bill. At the same time, I understand that for smaller service providers, the burdens of the enhanced transparency rule may outweigh the benefits. My amendment would strike a careful balance between these important consumer interests and very real costs for smaller internet service providers. Striking this balance is especially important back home in Iowa, where I have well over 100 separate internet service providers. The American Cable Association, who represents over 800 small operators, many of which are in Iowa, recommended to the FCC that it exempt providers with 100,000 subscriber lines or fewer from the enhanced transparency rules. By codifying this level, my amendment would allow these small businesses to focus their limited resources on increased deployment and better services. Increasing deployment is especially important in rural areas, as so many on this committee, I think, have experienced themselves, and where so many people still do not even have access to high-speed broadband. And to better inform our decision-making going forward, my amendment would also sunset this exemption in 5 years, while also requiring the FCC to collect more data about how many consumers will be affected and the real cost to providers. This report will make sure any extension of this exemption is data-driven and accurately weighs the costs and benefits of the rule. I've been working hard with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle over the past few weeks to try and reach a compromise we can all support. And while we have not yet come to an agreement, I am optimistic that we can work together across the aisle to offer a final bill that's amenable to both sides of the aisle. And to that end, Mr. Chair, I withdraw the amendment.
I thank the gentleman for, the gentleman withdraws his amendment without objection. I thank the gentleman for offering and making the case. You've been very productive to work with. I think, again, on this one, we were right down to a final sort of back and forth and couldn't find common ground. This is important work to get done, and we are happy to work with you going forward to find that right number that makes sense. And as I say, there's a lot of back and forth discussion here on our side because we want to get this right so that these small internet service providers like the ones you described, like the ones we all have, don't get overly burdened. And, you know, we were more than open to those discussions and thought we had this worked out. So we're kind of surprised as well by the amendment. But
I look forward to working with
you.
you.
So I appreciate the comedy here. With that, the gentleman has withdrawn his amendment. Are there any other amendments to this draft, discussion draft legislation? If not, does anyone seek recognition on this? I'll recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to say that we want to work with you on this. I think some of the concerns we have on the majority side, when you look at 500,000 subscribers, that includes some companies that have revenues in excess of $100 million. And we think they could easily comply with some of these consumer protections. So we want to work with you. It's our intention to voice this and work this on full committee.
I appreciate the gentleman's comments. We had proffered several discussion points well below that initial number, the starting point, so we're not in disagreement on that. That's why I said I thought we were actually very close on that, and I think this one shouldn't be hard to get finished up. So we're happy to work with you and Mr. Loebsack, anyone else that wants to. because I think we're all affected. We want to get it right. And as I say, I thought we're there. So the question now occurs on forwarding the discussion draft to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it, and the ayes have it, and the bill, for a guy who was going to voice vote it, I didn't know you were voting no. The bill is favorably forwarded to the full committee. Without objection, staff is authorized to make technical. Yeah, you do that. Without objection, staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes, move Mr. Doyle down 3 paces, and to the legislation approved by the subcommittee today. So ordered. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.